"Let go of that boy, you bastard." The words tore out of Maya Williams' throat like a storm as she flew down the stone path behind the Langston estate, apron flapping, curls wild in the wind. Her bare feet pounded the pavement, heart crashing in her chest as she watched the black-clad figure yank Liam Langston, just 5 years old, toward a white van idling just beyond the garden gate. The man didn't stop. He kept dragging the child, his grip tight on the boy's wrist as Liam screamed, flailing, "Maya, Maya, touch him again and I'll kill you. I swear to God." She lunged. Her arms caught Liam around the waist just as the man hoisted him up. For one terrifying second, the two of them tugged on the boy like a rope in a cruel game. Maya's fingernails scraped the man's sleeve. His elbow slammed into her jaw, dazing her. She stumbled, but refused to let go. Liam wailed, kicking, fighting. The man grunted, swore, and then he pulled a knife. It happened fast, too fast. A flash of silver. A line of fire across Maya's left shoulder. Blood bloomed through the fabric of her uniform. Her grip weakened. The pain shot through her arm, and for a moment, she thought she might lose him. And then, "Maya," a voice boomed from the veranda. Richard Langston. He had just returned, suitcase still in hand, suit jacket unbuttoned, eyes wide with disbelief and horror. "Let go of my son," he roared. The attacker froze just for an instant. It was enough. The man shoved Maya hard. She fell backward, cradling Liam against her body. The man darted back toward the van, where another masked figure threw open the door. The van screeched off into the street, vanishing around the corner like a phantom. Silence, except for Maya's breath ragged, shallow, and Liam's sobs, muffled against her blood-streaked blouse. If you feel for the character, don't forget to like this video. And drop a comment with your location. You might be surprised to find others nearby watching along with you. 20 minutes later, the Langston living room was swarming. Sirens had come and gone. Police were canvassing the neighborhood. Maya sat, trembling, on the edge of the sofa, left arm hastily bandaged by the estate's private nurse. Liam had finally calmed, asleep upstairs under sedatives. She tried to recount what happened. I don't know where he came from," she told the officer. "He must have been watching. He had a knife. I thought I lost him if Mr. Langston hadn't come." "You were very brave," the older officer said. "You saved that boy's life. I just did what I had to." Upstairs, Richard paced the hallway outside Liam's room, fists clenched. His face was pale, jaw tight. He'd seen it with his own eyes, Maya throwing herself at the man like a lioness protecting her cub. Bloodied and shaking, she hadn't let go. Down the hall, Jacob Langston, his younger brother, emerged from the study. "I just heard," Jacob said, his voice smooth, a little too calm. "Is Liam all right?" "He's sleeping now," Richard muttered. "I can't believe this happened. In your own home?" Jacob stepped forward, voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "You've got too much on your plate, Rich. The company, the estate, Liam. You're stretched thin." Richard turned, eyes narrowing. "Get to the point. Then, I'm saying maybe it's time you let someone else take the wheel. I've been here. I know the company inside out. Let me take over operations. Free you up to focus on being a father." "Number." The word came out sharp and immediate. Jacob's face darkened. "You don't even want to think about it? It's my company, Jacob. Built from the ground up. You want to help, fine. But I'm not handing it over." Jacob's jaw clenched. His smile twisted into something bitter. "You still don't trust me. After all this time, trust is earned." A long silence stretched between them before Jacob stepped back, his voice low and cold. "You'll regret this." He turned on his heel and stormed down the hallway right into Maya, who had just stepped out of the linen closet with a fresh towel pressed against her wounded shoulder. She'd heard the entire conversation. Jacob stopped dead, eyes locking on hers. "You little rat," he spat. Maya gasped, clutching the towel tighter. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, sir. I was just..." Slap. The sound echoed in the hallway like a whip. Jacob's hand struck her cheek hard enough to spin her half around. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. "You think you can spy on me, you damn maid," he snarled. "You don't belong here. You're nothing." Jacob. Richard's voice cracked like thunder as he appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes wide in disbelief. He rushed forward, stepping between them. Back off. What the hell do you think you're doing? She was snooping. I don't care. You don't lay a hand on her, ever. Jacob's face twisted in fury, but he didn't speak. Instead, he yanked his arm back, and in that moment, as his sleeve lifted slightly, Maya caught sight of something. A red welt, angled, jagged, a scratch on his forearm. Her breath caught in her throat. It looked familiar. To familiar. It was in the same spot, same angle as the one she'd left on the attacker. Her fingernails had caught during the struggle. She knew she'd cut him. She'd felt it. And now Jacob had the same wound. Jacob saw her looking. He pulled his sleeve down slowly, eyes narrowing. Richard hadn't noticed. He was too focused on protecting her. Get out, Richard said, pointing down the stairs. I don't want to see you here tonight. Jacob didn't argue. He gave Maya one last seething glance and stalked off, footsteps heavy. Maya stood frozen, heart hammering. Her cheek stung, her shoulder throbbed, but none of that mattered. That scratch, that moment, that look. Could it be? Could Jacob have been behind the kidnapping? She swallowed hard. It didn't make sense, and yet it made too much sense. The cameras disabled. The note. The sudden demand for the company. And now, the scratch. She couldn't prove it, not yet, but she could find out. She would watch him, follow his moves, pay attention, dig deeper. Because if Jacob Langston had anything to do with what happened to Liam today, then Maya William wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. The morning after the attack, Maya rose with the Sunday. Her shoulder throbbed, her cheek still bore the faint redness of Jacob's slap. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the image burned into her mind. Jacob's forearm, scratched and raw in the same place she'd clawed the kidnapper. That detail gnawed at her like a splinter buried deep. She dressed quietly and slipped outside with her phone. Under the wide oaks that lined the Langston estate, she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Atlanta PD, Detective Harris speaking. Marcus, it's Maya. A pause, then warmth broke through the line. Maya William. Lord, it's been a minute. You all right? Her voice dropped. Not really. Marcus, I think the man behind the attempt on Liam Langston is Jacob, Richard's brother. There was silence, then Harris said slowly, That's a heavy accusation. You got proof? Not yet. But I've got reason. And I've got you. Please. Just help me dig. Quietly, Harris sighed. All right, Maya, I owe you. You saved my hide back in high school more than once. Send me what you've got, and I'll start pulling strings. That day, Maya began watching Jacob closely. Every phone call, every sudden trip into town, every strange visitor at the estate. She passed notes to Harris, who fed her back records. Shell companies registered in Jacob's name. Payments wired to men with criminal histories. A van leased under one of those companies, the same description Maya had given police. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. By the end of the week, she had more than suspicion. She had evidence. The Langstons held a family dinner that Friday, meant to reassure everyone that life would return to normal. The dining hall glowed with chandeliers, silverware gleamed, and laughter bubbled around the table. But underneath the polished surface, the air was tight with unspoken things. Maya stood near the sideboard, pouring wine, her heart pounding in her chest. She caught Harris's eyes. He was there in plain clothes, pretending to be her guest. He gave the smallest nod. It was time. She cleared her throat. Mr. Langston, may I speak? Richard looked up, surprised. Around the table, relatives and business partners turned. Jacob smirked, sipping his wine. Maya set down the bottle, stepped into the light. Her voice was steady. The man who tried to take Liam wasn't some stranger. He was sent. And the one who sent him was sitting right here. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, forks clattering. Jacob rose slowly, eyes narrowing. You dare accuse me? Yes, Maya said, because I saw the wound I left on the attacker when I fought him. The same wound that appeared on your arm that night. Jacob laughed, sharp and ugly. Ridiculous. She's a maid. And now she plays detective? Harris stood, pulling out a folder. Not just her word. We have records. Payments. A leased van in your name. Testimony from men you hired. He laid the documents on the table, one by one, faces turned from Jacob to Richard. Richard's voice broke the silence, heavy with disbelief. Jacob, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't put my boy in danger. No. For a moment, Jacob's mask held, then his lips curled into a grin. Finally you see me. All those years in your shadow, the genius, the golden sun, the empire builder, and me, always the spare. I had to take what I deserved. You would have let them hurt Liam? Richard's voice shook. Jacob spread his hands. He was leverage, nothing more. And it worked. Look at you, broken, doubting everyone. I should have had the company years ago. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone sobbed. Harris moved forward, badge glinting. Jacob Langston, you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap and attempted extortion. 2 uniformed officers stepped in from the hall. Jacob's grin faltered as the cuffs snapped around his wrists. Get your hands off me. I'm a Langston, he shouted, thrashing as they dragged him away. His laughter echoed, manic and bitter, until the front doors slammed shut. The dining hall sat in stunned silence. No one moved. Richard sank into his chair, staring at the tablecloth as though it could swallow him whole. His hands shook. The great Richard Langston, billionaire and boardroom lion, looked small, fragile. Maya approached him carefully. Sir, he looked up, eyes wet. My own brother. My blood. Maya's voice softened. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. He closed his eyes, pressing his palms to his face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he lowered his hands, reached across the table, and covered hers with his. You saved my son, he whispered. And you saved me from him. I don't know how to thank you. Maya shook her head. Don't thank me. Just hold on to Liam. He's all that matters. Richard nodded, the weight of betrayal etched into every line of his face. I thought I'd lost everything when Catherine died. But tonight, I realized I nearly lost more. He exhaled slowly. I won't make that mistake again. Nye. Maya squeezed his hand once, firm. You're not alone, Mr. Langston. Not anymore. The chandelier above flickered, casting a soft glow over the fractured family gathered below. And in the quiet that followed, justice, however painful, had finally begun to take shape. The Langston estate had never felt so hollow. That night, after the police cars vanished down the drive with Jacob in the back seat, the grand dining hall emptied in silence. Guests slipped away without the usual handshakes or polite goodbyes, leaving only half-filled glasses of wine and untouched plates of roast duck. The chandelier still glowed above, but its light felt cruel, spotlighting a family torn apart. Richard sat slumped at the head of the table, his hands pressed together like a man in prayer. The room smelled of expensive food gone cold, but neither he nor Maya noticed. She stood a few feet away, hesitant, clutching a napkin between her fingers as though she could wring her nerves out of the cloth. At last Richard spoke, his voice low and broken. He was my brother, Maya. My little brother. I held him the night he was born. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to tie a tie. Catherine and I, we trusted him with Liam. And now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now I can't tell where the lie began, and where the truth ever was. Maya's chest ached. She stepped forward, placing the napkin gently on the table. Sometimes the people closest to us carry the sharpest knives, sir. Jacob chose greed over blood. That doesn't mean you failed him. It means he failed you. Richard looked at her, eyes rimmed red. You make it sound so simple. It's not, Maya admitted. But Liam needs you steady. He needs to know his daddy won't break. The mention of Liam softened Richard's face. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. He doesn't even understand yet. God help me, how do I tell a 5-year-old his uncle wanted to take him away? That he was just leverage? You don't tell him that, Maya said firmly. Not now. Not when he's still small enough to dream that everyone is good. Let him hold on to that a little longer. A beat of silence stretched, filled only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then Richard gave a weary nod. You're right. For once in my life, I'll follow someone else's advice. No, Maya almost smiled, but the weight of the evening pressed too hard on her chest. Later that night, she found herself standing outside Liam's bedroom door. She listened to his breathing on the other side. Steady and soft. The little boy stirred in his sleep, murmuring her name. Maya bit her lip, fighting back tears. Behind her, Richard appeared, barefoot, a glass of whiskey in hand. He leaned against the wall, staring at the door. When Catherine died, Jacob was the one who told me to keep going, he said quietly. He said family was all we had left. I believed him. And tonight, I watched him laugh in my face as he admitted he used my son like a bargaining chip. Maya folded her arms around herself. That laugh, that was the last mask coming off. He showed you who he truly island. Richard took a sip of whiskey, then lowered the glass. I don't know what to do next. I can handle a hostile boardroom. I can handle investors, competitors. But betrayal? From my own blood? That's a different war. Maya looked at him steadily. Then let me stand with you in that war. You don't have to fight alone. He studied her, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. Finally, he nodded once. You've already fought harder for Liam than anyone. Maybe harder than I did. His voice broke slightly. You bled for him. Maya shook her head. I'd do it again. He's worth it. No. The following morning, news trucks lined the street outside the estate. The scandal had already broken. Langston Eyre arrested for conspiracy to kidnap nephew. Headlines screamed, betrayal, greed, family torn apart. Richard avoided the cameras, but the press wouldn't relent. Every time the iron gates opened, flashes went off like fireworks. Inside, Richard sat at his desk, head bowed over a stack of papers. He hadn't slept. He looked up when Maya entered with a tray of coffee. They'll keep coming, he muttered. The media, the shareholders, the vultures. They smell blood. Maya set the tray down. Then you give them something else to smell. Strength. Resolve. Show them that the Langston name means more than scandal. He let out a bitter laugh. You sound like Catherine. She used to tell me the same thing whenever I doubted myself. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to smile. Then maybe listen to her? Through me. Richard's eyes softened. He reached for the coffee but didn't drink, instead staring at the steam rising from the cup. Do you believe people can come back from betrayal, Maya? Can I come back from this? She thought for a moment, then answered quietly. You don't come back the same, but you come back stronger. If you choose to. That evening, as dusk fell, Richard called a gathering of the estate staff. Housekeepers, gardeners, drivers, they all assembled in the great hall, whispering among themselves. Rumors had already reached them. Jacob's arrest had shaken not just the family but everyone tied to the household. Richard stood before them, shoulders squared though his eyes still betrayed exhaustion. Maya stayed near the back, watching. My friends, Richard began, his voice carrying across the marble hall. You've all heard pieces of what happened. I won't hide it from you. My brother, Jacob, betrayed this family. He endangered my son. He endangered all of us. He paused, the weight of the words heavy in the silence. I can't explain his choices, and I won't excuse them, but I promise you this. Liam and this house will be safe. I will not let treachery define the Langston name. There was a murmur of approval. Cautious but supportive. Maya felt a swell of pride and relief. He was finding his footing again. Afterward, Richard found her in the corridor. I saw you watching, he said. You did well, she told him. He gave a tired smile. Only because you pushed me to. For a long moment, they stood together in the quiet hall. Then Richard's expression shifted, grief seeping back into his eyes. It still hurts, Maya. To know the boy I grew up protecting was willing to destroy me. I don't know how to carry that. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. You carry it by remembering the ones who stood with you. Liam, Madeline, even me. Jacob may be your blood, but he's not your family anymore. We are. His throat tightened. He nodded once, then whispered, "Thank you." That night, as Maya lay awake in her small room, she thought about the road ahead. Jacob would face trial, but scars of betrayal would remain. Richard was fractured but not broken. Liam would need love more than ever, and she, just a maid from Atlanta, was suddenly at the center of a storm that could ruin or redeem the Langston legacy. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer into the darkness. "Lord, give me the strength to keep them safe, because I think this fight is only beginning." For a brief moment, it seemed the storm had passed. Jacob was behind bars, Richard had spoken boldly to the staff, and the estate felt steadier than it had in weeks. But Maya knew better. Evil didn't vanish overnight. It lingered like smoke after a fire, seeping into corners, clinging to the air. On the third morning after Jacob's arrest, Maya rose before dawn. The sun hadn't touched the horizon yet, but she wanted time alone. She walked the grounds, the grass damp with dew. The oak trees whispered in the breeze, and in the quiet, she could almost believe things were normal again. Almost. When she returned to the servants' entrance, she found a white envelope tucked under the door. No stamp, no address. Just her name, written in block letters. Maya. Her stomach knotted. She opened it slowly, scanning the short message inside. "Jacob may be gone, but we are not. Stay silent if you value your life." Her hands trembled. She read it again and again, the words burning themselves into her mind. Someone else had been working with Jacob, someone who was still free. Later that morning, Richard summoned her to his office. His suit was crisp, his tie straight, but the exhaustion around his eyes betrayed another sleepless night. Liam sat curled in a leather chair with a picture book, blissfully unaware. "Maya," Richard began, "the board is circling. Investors are nervous. They want assurances that the company isn't collapsing under scandal." He rubbed his temples. "But honestly, I don't care about them. I care about my son. I need to know, will Liam be safe here, in this house?" Maya hesitated. She reached into her apron and placed the note on his desk. His eyes darkened as he read it. "So it's not over," he muttered. "There are others." "Yes, sir," Maya said softly. "Jacob had help, and they're warning me to keep quiet." Richard looked at her sharply. "And will you?" She met his gaze, steady. "Number not when Liam's safety is at stake." For a long moment, Richard said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair. "You're braver than most people I know, Maya, but I won't let them touch you. Not after what you've already risked." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You can't protect me from shadows, sir. But maybe we can drag them into the light." That evening, Maya met Detective Harris at a small diner outside the city. The neon sign buzzed overhead, and the smell of fried food clung to the air. Harris slid into the booth across from her, a folder in hand. "You were right," he said, lowering his voice. "Jacob wasn't working alone. Money moved through 3 shell companies before it hit the men in the van. And one of those companies is still active." Maya's pulse quickened. "Whose name is on it?" Harris tapped the folder. "A fixer named Clarence Doyle, ex-military, dirty record, hired muscle for hire. And guess what? Last known contact Jacob Langston, the night before the kidnapping." Maya's mind raced. So Clarence might still be out there, watching. "More than might," Harris said grimly. He pushed a photograph across the table. It was a grainy shot from a traffic cam. Clarence's face partially visible behind the wheel of a sedan. Date, stamped yesterday. Near the Langston estate. Maya's throat went dry. "He's close." Harris leaned forward. "Listen to me, Maya. You've already done more than enough. Let us handle this. Stay out of it before you get hurt again." But Maya shook her head. "I can't. Not while Liam's life is still in danger." Back at the estate, dinner was unusually quiet. Richard sat at the head of the table, barely touching his food. Liam chattered happily about his toy cars, blissfully unaware of the tension around him. Maya smiled and nodded, but her mind was elsewhere on the note, on Clarence Doyle, on the shadows still circling. When Liam was tucked into bed, Maya lingered by his door, listening to his soft breathing. She whispered, "Sleep safe, little one." I'll keep the monsters away. As she turned, a faint sound caught her ear, a creak at the far end of the hallway. She froze. Slowly, she walked toward it. A window stood open, curtains swaying. She closed it, heart pounding. Then she noticed something on the sill, a boot print, muddy and fresh. Someone had been inside. The next day, Richard gathered his closest relatives, those still loyal, along with a few trusted executives. It was meant to be a reassurance, a show of unity. The great hall glittered with chandeliers, the long table lined with silver trays and crystal glasses. But Maya couldn't shake the weight pressing on her chest. She stood near the wall, watching as Richard spoke. "Jacob betrayed us," Richard said firmly. "But the company will not fall. The family will not break. We move forward together." Polite applause followed. Yet as Maya scanned the faces, she caught a flicker, one guest avoiding her eyes, shifting uncomfortably. A man she recognized from Jacob's earlier gatherings, his cuff pulled down too quickly over his wrist. Her instinct screamed. She leaned toward Harris, who had been invited under the guise of security. "That man," she whispered, nodding toward the guest. "Watch him." Harris gave a subtle nod. Moments later, as the servers cleared dishes, Maya stepped forward. Her voice cut through the chatter. "Before we toast to unity, there's something you all need to see." Heads turned. Richard frowned. "Maya?" She held her ground. "This isn't over. Jacob wasn't acting alone. The proof is here." Gasps rippled around the table. The nervous guest stiffened. Harris opened his folder and laid photographs, receipts, and bank transfers on the table. Money moved from Jacob to Clarence Doyle. And Clarence was here, at this estate, last night. The room erupted. The guest tried to slip away, but officers waiting outside stormed in, pinning him before he reached the door. Richard rose slowly, his face pale. He looked around at the stunned relatives. My own brother's betrayal was enough. But now I learned strangers were brought into my home, into my son's world. This ends here. No more secrets. The man in cuffs spat curses, but Harris silenced him. Richard's gaze fell on Maya. "You found this. You brought it to light. Again." His voice cracked. "How many times must you save us before I believe you're the only one I can trust?" Maya's throat tightened. "As many times as it takes, sir." That night, after the guests had gone, and the police cars faded once more into the darkness, Richard sat alone in the library, staring into the fire. Maya approached quietly. He didn't look up. "I feel like I'm standing in the ruins of my own life, Maya. First my brother, now strangers with knives in the dark. How much more can a man lose?" Maya sat across from him, her voice gentle. "You haven't lost everything. You still have Liam. And you still have people willing to fight for you. That's more than most." His eyes lifted to hers. "And you, I still have you." She felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "Yes, you still have me." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the shelves. For the first time since the ordeal began, Richard allowed himself to lean back, closing his eyes. And Maya sat quietly, keeping watch because the shadows had not left, and she knew the fight was far from over. The Langston estate did not rest easily. After the dinner where Clarence Doyle's name surfaced and his accomplice was dragged away, the household staff moved with nervous haste. Curtains were drawn earlier, doors double-checked, and the night patrol was increased. Still, Maya felt the air heavy with something unsaid, as if the house itself expected another strike. She tried to quiet her mind with work, folding Liam's tiny shirts, arranging his toys. The boy had slept soundly, unaware of the storm swirling around him. But Maya could not shake the memory of the muddy footprint on the windowsill. She knew danger was patient. It didn't vanish just because one man was caught. Detective Harris stopped by late the next morning. He walked the grounds with her, his badge hidden but his eyes sharp. "Clarence is still out there," he said. "He's smart, ruthless, and he's got reason to finish what Jacob started. We think he might try again." Maya frowned. "Then why isn't he already behind bars?" "We've got circumstantial evidence. Not enough to nail him in court. We need him in the act, or at least with something solid in hand." Harris's gaze softened as he looked at her. "That means you need to be careful. Don't go wandering alone." Maya nodded, though her heart rebelled. She had no intention of cowering when Liam's safety was still at risk. That evening, Richard called her into the study. He was pale, worn, though his voice carried determination. Maya, tomorrow I have to meet with the board in the city. They want to see me in person, prove I'm still in control. I hate leaving Liam here, but I can't take him into that snake pit. I need you to stay close to him while I'm gone. Ma, you don't even have to ask, Maya replied. I'll guard him like he's mine. Richard's expression softened, something like gratitude breaking through the weight of his grief. I know you will. The next afternoon, the house was quiet. Liam napped after lunch, curled in his blankets with a toy car clutched to his chest. Maya used the time to step into the back garden, letting the cool autumn air wash over her. She needed a breath, just a moment of calm. The roses were still blooming, though the season had turned, their petals flushed deep red against the fading Sunday. She bent to clip a dying bloom when the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. A sound soft, deliberate rustled from the hedges. Maya straightened slowly, scissors still in hand. Who's there? No answer. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. And then a figure burst from the hedge, tall, broad-shouldered, a scar across his cheek. His eyes were cold steel. Clarence Doyle. Before she could scream, he lunged. Maya swung the scissors instinctively, slashing at his arm. He grunted but didn't slow. His hand closed around her wrist, twisting hard until the scissors clattered to the ground. You should have kept quiet, he growled, breath hot against her face. Now you pay the price. She struggled, clawing at his sleeve, her mind flashing back to the first attack. The knife. The blood. Fear surged through her. But so did fury. You're not touching that boy again, she spat. Clarence shoved her hard against the stone wall of the garden. Pain shot up her spine. He pressed an arm across her throat, cutting her breath. I don't need the boy this time. I just need to silence the maid who talks too much. Maya's vision blurred. Desperate, she jammed her knee upward, connecting with his ribs. He cursed, loosening his grip just enough for her to shove him back and gasp for air. Her scream tore through the garden. Help, Harris! Almost instantly. Footsteps thundered across the lawn. Detective Harris, who had been waiting in a parked car just beyond the gates, appeared with his weapon drawn. Police! Drop her now, Clarence turned, eyes wild. He shoved Maya aside and bolted across the grass. Harris gave chase, the two men crashing through hedges, the sound of breaking branches echoing in the air. Maya stumbled to her feet, chest heaving, one hand pressed to her bruised throat. She staggered toward the patio just as Richard's car pulled up the drive. He leapt from the back seat, confusion etched across his face. Maya, what happened? She pointed weakly toward the woods. Clarence. He was here. Richard's face drained of color. Dear God. Minutes later, Harris returned, his shirt torn, breathing hard. He got away. Damn it. He's fast. Richard's fists clenched. How close did he get to the house? Maya's voice trembled. Too close. Ugh. That night, the estate was on lockdown. Security guards patrolled the grounds. Motion lights snapped on at every corner. Richard sat in the library with a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking as he recounted what Harris had told him. He came for you, Richard said, his voice low. Not Liam this time, because you've been the one pulling back the curtain. He looked at her, eyes fierce. You put yourself in danger for my son. For me. And I've let you stand alone. Maya shook her head. I'm not alone. Not while you believe me. Richard swallowed hard. I didn't. Not at first. But tonight, God help me. Maya, you've done more to protect this family than I ever have. She reached across the table, laying her hand over his. Don't say that. You're still the anchor here. But anchors need chains. And chains are forged with more than one link. We hold each other. For a long moment, the two sat in silence, firelight dancing across their faces. Then Richard said softly, Clarence won't stop until he's forced to. We'll need to draw him out. Expose him the way you exposed Jacob. Maya's chest tightened. She was terrified. But beneath the fear was a steady flame of resolve. Then we set the trap. And when he comes, we end this. Later, as she checked on Liam one last time before bed, Maya lingered by his side. He stirred in his sleep, mumbling nonsense words, then settled again. She brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, "No one's taking you, baby. Not while I still have breath." Outside the window, the garden rustled with night sounds. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. Maya's eyes narrowed, her heart quickening. The shadows had not lifted. They were watching still, but so was she. The following morning, the Langston estate buzzed with an energy Maya had never felt before. Guards patrolled the gates. Harris's men moved in and out, and Richard stood at the center of it all like a general preparing for war. Yet beneath the bustle, there was fear that Clarence Doyle would return, and next time, he might not fail. Maya stood in the library with Harris, her bruised throat hidden beneath a scarf. He laid out photographs, bank transfers, and a map of the estate. "Clarence won't stop," Harris said grimly. "He's angry, and angry men are sloppy. That's our advantage. But we can't wait for him to strike at random. We set the terms. We draw him out." Maya frowned, her hand resting on the table. "And how exactly do we do that?" Harris met her eyes. "We use what he wants most. Leverage. He thinks you're the problem, the one who exposed Jacob. The one who keeps connecting the dots. If we make it look like you're vulnerable, he'll come." Richard, who had been silent, slammed his hand against the table. "Absolutely not. You're suggesting we dangle Maya like bait?" Maya's heart pounded, but her voice was calm. "If it's the only way to end this, then yes. We can't keep waiting for him to crawl through windows. He'll always find a way back unless we stop him for good." Richard turned to her, his eyes blazing. "I will not put you at risk again." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "With all respect, Mr. Langston, I've been at risk since the moment I grabbed Liam from that van. Clarence has already marked me. The question isn't if he'll come, but when. So we decide how and we make sure this time he doesn't walk away." Richard's jaw tightened. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with visible pain, he exhaled. "If you do this, I won't leave your side." Harris shook his head. "No, Rich. Clarence will never take the bait if he thinks you're near. He'll expect Maya alone, unguarded. But we'll be there. Hidden. The second he moves, we close in." "Man," Maya squared her shoulders. "Then we do it." That evening, the plan was set. Maya would walk the garden at dusk, just as she had when Clarence attacked her before. This time, however, the open windows and unlocked doors were deliberate. Harris and his men would hide in the shadows, Richard watching from the library window, his fists clenched around the edge of the sill. Maya dressed simply, her scarf wrapped tightly, her steps measured as she descended the stone steps into the garden. The roses glowed faintly in the fading light, their scent heavy on the air. She forced herself to breathe steadily, though every nerve screamed at her to turn back. She whispered to herself, "For Liam, for Richard, for the truth." She reached the fountain at the center of the garden. The water rippled softly. The world felt too quiet. Then she heard the crunch of a boot on gravel. Maya stiffened. Clarence emerged from the hedge like a shadow taking form. His scarred face twisted into a smile. "I warned you, Maid. You just don't know when to shut your mouth." Her heart thundered, but she held her ground. "You're a coward. Hiding behind Jacob's money. Threatening children. You want me? I'm right here." He moved closer, knife glinting in his hand. "You think you're brave, but brave people die the same as anyone else." Maya forced herself to keep her voice steady, loud enough for Harris's men to hear. "Funny. That scratch on your arm says otherwise. You remember that, Clarence, when I cut you fighting for Liam? That mark ties you to Jacob. That mark is the reason you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell." His face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." But before he could lunge, the night exploded. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Harris's voice roared as floodlights flared across the garden. Clarence whipped around, cursing, and sprinted toward the gate. Maya darted backward, nearly stumbling. She saw Richard in the window, pounding the glass, shouting her name. Clarence slashed through a hedge, but officers closed in from both sides. A gunshot cracked the night warning fire. Clarence froze for half a second, then spun back toward Maya, rage boiling in his eyes. "If I go down," he growled, "I'll take you with me." He charged, Maya's breath caught, her body frozen until Harris tackled Clarence from the side, sending both men crashing into the fountain. Water splashed high into the air, drenching them as they grappled. The knife clattered onto the stone. Maya snatched it, her hands trembling, and hurled it across the garden. Harris pinned Clarence, shouting for cuffs. Two officers rushed forward, snapping steel around his wrists. Clarence roared, thrashing, water dripping from his face. "This isn't over. You hear me? The Langstons will fall. Everyone has a price." Maya stood trembling, watching as they dragged him up from the fountain. For the first time, she let her knees buckle, sinking onto the cold stone edge. Richard burst into the garden moments later, his tie undone, his face pale with terror. He dropped beside her, his hands hovering as if afraid to touch. "Maya, are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her throat burned from fear. "No, not this time." His hand found hers, gripping tight. "I swear, I'll never put you in danger again." Maya met his gaze, her voice low but firm. It wasn't just danger. It was justice. And now Liam can sleep safe. Richard's eyes glistened, though he blinked them clear. "You've given me more than safety. You've given me faith again. Faith in people. Faith in loyalty. Something Jacob stole years ago." Harris approached, dripping wet but grinning. "He's done. We've got him on tape, on record, and in custody. Clarence Doyle won't see daylight for a long time." Maya exhaled slowly, her body finally releasing the tension that had wound tight for days. She looked at Richard, at Harris, at the men leading Clarence away in chains, and she thought of Liam, asleep upstairs, never knowing how close the monsters had come. "Then it's over," she whispered. Richard squeezed her hand. "Number, it's just the beginning of something better." The garden fell quiet once more, the roses swaying gently as though nothing had happened. But Maya knew the truth. Tonight was not just victory. It was proof that even in the darkest places, light could still break through. Morning broke gray and heavy over the Langston estate. The roses in the garden still dripped from the night's ordeal, their petals bruised by the struggle that had taken place. Clarence Doyle was gone, locked away in custody, but his echo lingered like a phantom. Maya woke with stiff muscles and dark shadows under her eyes, but a rare calm filled her chest. For once, Liam could breathe easy. Richard, however, had no such calm. By sunrise, news trucks were already lined outside the gates. Headlines blared across screens and newspapers. "Langston betrayal deepens. Brother and mercenary arrested." Pundits debated on morning television whether Richard Langston's empire could survive scandal within his own bloodline. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting downtown. In the library, Richard stood before the tall windows, jaw tight, tie hanging loose around his neck. "They'll rip me apart," he muttered. "The board, the press, the shareholders, they smell weakness like wolves." Maya set a cup of coffee on the desk. "Then show them you're not weak. You've been through hell, and you're still standing. That's more than most men can say." Richard gave a humorless laugh. "Do you have any idea what they'll ask me? They'll want to know why my brother turned criminal, why my son was nearly kidnapped, why a maid had to protect my family while I stood by." "You didn't stand by," Maya said sharply. "You came running when it mattered. And when you doubted me, you listened when the truth came. That counts for something. They don't need to see a flawless man, Richard. They need to see a father who refuses to be broken." For a moment, Richard just stared at her, the weight in his eyes heavy but steadier. "You should be the one running this company," he said softly. Maya shook her head. "I know kitchens, gardens, and how to read people's hearts. That's my business. But I'll stand by you while you face yours." By late morning, the Langston car rolled toward the city. Richard sat stiff in the back seat, papers in his lap, Maya beside him despite his protests that she stay behind. Liam remained at the estate with Madeline and a security detail, safe for once. As they neared the towering glass headquarters, The crowd thickened. Reporters surged forward like a wave. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust into the air. "Mr. Langston, did your brother act alone? Is it true your company funds were used in the scheme? Will you resign as CEO?" The questions cut like knives. Richard raised his chin, shielding his eyes from the lights. Maya touched his sleeve briefly, grounding him. "Steady," she whispered. He nodded once, then stepped forward. "Good morning," Richard said firmly, his voice carrying over the din. "Yes. My brother betrayed me. Yes. My family was put in danger. But make no mistake, Langston Industries will not be defined by one man's greed. We will continue to innovate, to employ thousands, to stand as a pillar of this community. And as a father, I will never again allow shadows to threaten my son. We will move forward, stronger than before." The crowd erupted with more questions, but his tone had shifted the tide. Maya watched the cameras pivot, journalists scribbling furiously. He had faced them, not with excuses, but with conviction. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with murmurs as Richard entered. Suits lined the long table, eyes sharp with judgment. The chairman, an older man with steel-gray hair, cleared his throat. "Richard, this company has weathered many storms, but none like this. Convince us that you are still fit to lead." Richard placed his hands on the table, steady. "I won't deny what's happened. My brother's actions shamed our name, endangered my child. But I ask you, what company is stronger? One that hides scandal, or one that survives it openly? We have the chance to prove resilience, to show the world that Langston Industries is not about one man, but about all of us. If you want me gone, I won't fight you. But if you want this company to stand, then stand with me." The room fell silent. Eyes flicked from one another, calculating. Finally, the chairman nodded. "Then we'll stand. But the world will be watching every move you make." When they stepped out of the building, the crowd had not dispersed. Reporters still shouted, flashes still burst like lightning. Richard answered only one question before the car whisked them away. "Mr. Langston, how did your family survive such betrayal?" He paused, his gaze flicking briefly to Maya at his side. "Because of loyalty," he answered. "Because of people who refused to break." The car door closed, shutting out the storm of noise. Inside, silence hung between them until Richard finally exhaled, leaning back. "I meant it, you know. I wouldn't have survived without you." Maya looked out the window, heart heavy. "I did what anyone decent would do." "No," Richard said softly. "You did more. You fought when even I couldn't. You bled for my son. That isn't duty, that's loyalty." He paused, his voice rough. "I don't know what I'd do if you ever left." Her chest tightened. For days, she had been turning that question over in her own mind. Was it her place to stay? She was a maid, after all, hired to clean, to serve. Yet she had become protector, confidant, anchor, and the longer she stayed, the more her heart tethered itself to this house, to Liam's laughter, to Richard's weary smile. She said quietly, "I haven't decided yet." Richard's eyes searched hers, something unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded slowly, as if accepting that answer, though disappointment lingered in his gaze. That night, back at the estate, Liam bounded into Maya's arms, his little hands wrapping around her neck. "You came back," he squealed. Maya hugged him tight, breathing in the innocence of his scent, the simplicity of his joy. "I'll always come back," she whispered. Richard watched from the doorway, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. For the first time in days, a glimmer of peace touched the Langston home. But Maya knew decisions still loomed. Whether she stayed or went, her life was no longer the same, and neither was Richard's. As she tucked Liam into bed, he clutched her hand. "Don't go away, Miss Maya. Promisey." Her throat tightened. She brushed his hair back and kissed his forehead. "I promise I'll always protect you. Always." Later, in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the small mirror. The scarf hid the bruise at her throat, but not the weight in her eyes. She whispered into the empty room, "Where do I belong now?" Outside, the estate stood tall against the night sky, lights glowing like beacons. The storm had not fully passed, but for the first time, Maya felt she had the strength to weather it, whether as a servant, a guardian, or something far more. The week after Richard's confrontation with the board was a blur of phone calls, security meetings, and restless nights. The company had steadied, at least in public. But the Langston name was still tangled in scandal. Reporters camped outside the estate like crows, waiting for the next scrap of carrion. Maya did her best to shield Liam from the chaos. She cooked his meals, read his bedtime stories, played with him in the garden as if the world beyond the gates did not exist. But whispers had begun to slip through even the thickest walls. Whispers not about Jacob, but about her. It started with a newspaper column. "Who is Maya William?" The headline asked in bold letters. The article called her a mystery maid, who had somehow become indispensable to the Langston family, suggesting her influence over Richard was unusually strong. Other outlets picked it up, hinting at motives, at ambition hidden behind loyalty. By the end of the week, a different kind of question surfaced. Had Maya William orchestrated her own heroism? Richard found her in the kitchen one morning, standing at the sink, hands motionless in the dishwater, her face pale. The folded newspaper lay beside her, the ink smudged from where her wet fingers had gripped it too tightly. "They're saying I staged it," she whispered. "That I put Liam in danger just so I could look like a savior." Her voice cracked. "I would never." Richard snatched up the paper and crumpled it in his fist. "Trash. That's all at Island trash from people who don't know you. But people read it," she said, her eyes wide. "They believe it. What happens when Liam's old enough to see these stories?" Richard's expression softened. He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then he'll look at you, not the headlines. He'll remember who held him when he was afraid. He'll remember who bled for him. That's the truth no paper can erase." Her throat tightened, but she nodded. That afternoon, Maya walked into town for the first time since the ordeal began. She wanted to buy Liam a new book, something lighthearted, about pirates and treasure. But as she entered the bookstore, the air shifted. Conversations dimmed. Eyes turned. Two women by the counter whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "That's her, the maid who saved the boy, or so she says." Another voice murmured, "Funny how she's always right there when trouble strikes. Makes you wonder." Heat flooded Maya's cheeks. She kept her eyes forward, clutching the book against her chest as she paid quickly and left. Outside, the chill autumn air bit her skin, but not enough to cool the sting of humiliation. On the walk back, she passed the church where her mother used to sing in the choir. The pastor, Reverend Cole, stood outside, sweeping leaves. He looked up, his face etched with kindness. "Maya William," he said, leaning on the broom. "The papers are full of your name, some of it cruel. But I remember you as a girl who shared her lunch with children who had none. Don't let whispers steal your peace." "Boo." Tears pricked her eyes. "But what if those whispers grow louder than the truth?" "Then you keep living in the truth," he answered simply. "Time has a way of silencing lies." She carried his words with her back to the estate, but the ache in her chest remained. That evening, Richard hosted a small dinner with a few trusted friends from the community. He wanted to show strength, to prove that Langston Industries was still grounded locally. Maya helped serve, moving quietly from guest to guest, but she felt the stares, the subtle questions in their eyes. One man finally voiced what others danced around. "Mr. Langston, forgive me, but isn't it risky relying so heavily on one employee? A maid, no less. Some people might wonder if she has other interests." The table fell silent. Richard's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down. His voice, when it came, was steel. "This woman saved my son's life. Twice. She exposed the men who would have destroyed me. If anyone in this town wants to question her loyalty, they'll have to answer to me." Maya's breath caught. She lowered her eyes, blinking back tears. After dinner, when the guests had gone, she found Richard in the library, pouring himself a drink. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she said softly. He turned, his gaze fierce. "Yes, I did, because you've done more for this family than any board member, any so-called friend, any blood relation, and I won't let them tear you down." Her heart ached with gratitude and confusion. She wanted to believe his words, to let them wrap around her like armor. But a part of her still feared the whispers would grow louder, that they would twist her story until even she no longer recognized it. Later that night, Maya sat alone in her small room. The book she had bought for Liam rested on her lap, unopened. She thought of the faces in the bookstore, the voices at dinner, the accusations in the papers. A knock at her door startled her. It was Richard. He leaned against the frame, looking weary but determined. "I know what they're saying," he admitted. "I can't stop every headline. But I can promise you this. In this house, you'll never have to doubt where you stand. You belong here, Maya. With Liam. With me." Her breath caught. Belong. The word wrapped around her heart like a question she had never dared to ask. Could she belong here? Not just as a servant, not just as a protector, but as family. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "Thank you, sir. That means more than I can say." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll face the world again." When he left, Maya looked down at the book still resting in her lap. She opened it to the first page, the illustration of a ship sailing bravely into uncharted waters. She smiled faintly. It felt like her own story adrift in whispers, but steering toward something larger, something truer. She whispered into the quiet room, "Let them talk. I know who I am." And for the first time in days, the weight of the whispers began to lift. The following morning dawned quiet, but the silence in the Langston estate was uneasy, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Maya had barely finished setting Liam's breakfast plate when she noticed him frowning at the newspaper left on the counter. He couldn't read every word yet, but the large letters splashed across the front page were enough to catch his attention. "Who is Maya William?" Liam pointed at it with a small finger. "Miss Maya, that's your name." Her breath caught. She reached to fold the paper, but he pulled it back, eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Why are they writing about you? Did you do something bad?" The question sliced deeper than any accusation from adults ever could. Maya knelt beside him, her hand gently brushing his hair. "No, baby. I didn't do anything bad. Sometimes people don't understand the truth. And when they don't, they make up stories. That's what this is. Just stories." He tilted his head. "But stories are supposed to be fun." Maya smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "Yes, the good ones are. This one isn't. This is a story that isn't true. Do you trust me, Liam?" He nodded vigorously. "Always." Her chest loosened just a little. She kissed his forehead and handed him a spoon. "Then eat your cereal. That's the only truth we need right now." But even as she turned back to the stove, she felt the sting of his question echoing in her chest. "Did you do something bad?" Children didn't hide behind polite suspicion. They asked directly, and their innocence carried weight. Later that day, Maya walked Liam through the garden. He clutched her hand tightly, glancing around with a seriousness unusual for a boy his age. Finally, he blurted, "Are you gonna leave us?" Maya stopped mid-step. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard one of the drivers talking," Liam admitted. "He said you'll probably go away now because people don't like you. I don't want you to go." His voice cracked at the last word, and he squeezed her hand tighter. Maya knelt so she was eye level with him. "Listen to me, Liam Langston. People can talk all they want, but they don't get to decide my heart. And my heart tells me to stay right here with you." His lower lip trembled. "Promise?" "Promise," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. He buried his face against her neck. And in that small, desperate embrace, Maya felt the full weight of what she had become in his life, not just a maid, not just a protector, but something closer to family. That evening, Richard found Maya in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning. He leaned against the doorframe. His tie loosened after another long day of fending off reporters and stockholders. "You've been quiet," he said gently. Maya hesitated, then sighed. "Liam asked me if I'd done something bad." He saw the paper. Richard's jaw tightened. "Damn them. They'll twist anything for a headline." "It's not just the papers," Maya admitted. "He's hearing it from staff, from whispers. Children catch everything. He's old enough to know when people are talking about me." Richard stepped closer, his eyes softening. "And what did you tell him?" "That I didn't do anything wrong. That people make up stories when they don't understand the truth. And I promised I'd stay." She paused, voice low. But what if I can't keep that promise? What if the pressure gets so heavy you're forced to let me go? Richard shook his head firmly. That will never happen. Not while I have breath in me. You belong here, Maya. You've earned that place 100 times over. Her eyes shimmered, though she blinked quickly. Thank you. The next day, the whispers grew louder. Outside the gates, a small crowd had gathered, not reporters this time, but townspeople. Some carried signs. Langston betrayal hurts us all. Others muttered accusations about money, corruption, and betrayal. And among the chants, Maya heard her own name twisted into something ugly. She stood at the upstairs window, watching, her heart sinking. Liam padded up beside her, holding his toy car. Why are they shouting? Because they're scared, Maya said softly. And scared people sometimes shout instead of listening. He frowned. But they're shouting at you. You didn't do anything. Maya crouched, placing her hands on his shoulders. That's the thing, Liam. People don't always shout at the guilty. Sometimes they shout at the ones who stand in the light, because the light makes them uncomfortable. He seemed to think hard about that. Like when I win a race at school and the other kids get mad. Maya smiled faintly. Exactly like that. Except this race is about truth. And I'll keep running it. No matter how loud they shout. That night, after Liam was asleep, Maya sat with Richard by the fire in the library. The flames crackled, casting shadows across his weary face. Do you ever think, Maya asked quietly, that the world doesn't want us to win, that no matter how hard we fight, there will always be someone ready to twist it? Richard swirled the whiskey in his glass. Every day, but then I remember winning isn't about silence, it's about standing. And you, Maya, you've stood taller than anyone I've ever known. Her throat tightened. I don't always feel tall. Today, when Liam asked if I'd done something bad, I felt smaller than I've ever been. Richard reached across, his hand covering hers. He asked because he's learning how to make sense of a cruel world. But he trusts you, Maya. More than anyone. Don't let a child's question break you. It's proof he sees you as someone worth asking. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She looked away, embarrassed, but Richard's voice softened. Maya, if you hadn't walked into this house years ago, I don't know where we'd be. Maybe Liam wouldn't even be here today. And he stopped, swallowing hard. I'd be lost. She met his eyes then, her heart thundering. For a moment, neither spoke, the air heavy with all the words unspoken. Finally, Maya whispered, Then I'll keep standing. For him. For you. No matter what the world says. Richard nodded, his voice low and firm. We'll face it together. Later, alone in her room, Maya replayed Liam's voice in her mind. Did you do something bad? She lay awake staring at the ceiling. The firelight from downstairs fading into darkness. She knew this was only the beginning. Whispers would not die quickly. But she had made a promise to a child. And to herself. And a promise, Maya William believed, was stronger than any rumor. The tension around the Langston estate had become unbearable. Every morning, fresh headlines dripped venom. Every evening, a new rumor spread across town. Maya's name was on everyone's lips, sometimes with praise, but more often with suspicion. The whispers had not broken her, but they had begun to fray the edges of her spirit. Richard saw it. He watched the way her shoulders stiffened whenever she walked into a room, the way she avoided town unless absolutely necessary, the way her smile faded too quickly. He knew he couldn't let it continue. One evening, he called her into the library. The fire burned low, throwing flickering shadows across the walls. Richard stood at his desk, a stack of invitations in hand. Maya, he said, his voice steady but urgent. There's a charity gala next week. It's one of the biggest events of the year. Politicians, executives, the press, they'll all be there. And I intend to go. Maya tilted her head, wary. You think that's wise? The press will be circling like hawks. Exactly, he said, locking eyes with her. That's why I'm going. I won't let them define this family with lies. And I won't let them define you. I plan to stand before everyone and say the truth out loud. That you are not a suspect, not an opportunist. You are the reason Liam and I are alive. and the world will hear it. Her heart raced. The thought of facing that crowd, of standing under their scrutiny, made her stomach twist. "Richard, you don't have to do this for me." He stepped closer, his voice firm. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for us. For Liam, for the truth. You carried this family when I faltered. Now it's my turn to carry you." Maya swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. She nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand with you." The night of the gala arrived, glittering and cold. The ballroom downtown was ablaze with chandeliers. The marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns milled about. Champagne flutes clinking as laughter and gossip mingled. The Langston name rippled through every corner, half in curiosity, half in contempt. Richard entered first, commanding as ever in a black suit, his chin held high. Maya walked beside him in a simple navy dress, nothing ostentatious, but elegant in its quiet dignity. Conversations faltered as eyes turned to them. Cameras flashed, recording every step. Maya felt the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, but Richard's steady presence kept her rooted. He leaned slightly toward her, murmuring, "Head high. They don't get to decide who you are." They made their way to the stage at the center of the room, where the evening speeches were scheduled. The host welcomed Richard warmly, but the murmurs from the crowd betrayed the tension. When he stepped up to the microphone, the room hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his deep voice carrying through the hall, "I stand before you tonight not just as a businessman or a philanthropist, but as a man who has faced betrayal from his own blood. Many of you know my family's story now more than I ever wished you would. My brother tried to take my son from me, to destroy everything I built. And through it all, I was not the one who saved us. It was her." He gestured to Maya, who froze as hundreds of eyes turned. "This woman," Richard continued, his voice growing stronger, "risked her life to protect my son, twice. She bled for him. She fought men twice her size without hesitation. And when lies and whispers came to discredit her, she stayed. She stayed because her loyalty is stronger than their hate. She is not a servant in my house, she is family." Gasps rippled through the room. Some nodded in respect, others whispered behind their hands. Maya's chest burned with emotion. Richard pressed on. "So, let me be perfectly clear. Any man or woman who questions Maya Williams' place in this family will answer to me. Because without her, Liam would not be here. And without her, I would not be here. Loyalty and courage, those are the marks of true family. Not blood, not wealth, not titles, and I will not let anyone forget it." The hall erupted not with whispers this time, but with applause. It began tentatively, then spread, until even the skeptics found themselves clapping. Maya stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She had never expected public acknowledgement, never expected to be defended so fiercely. When Richard returned to her side, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said quietly, his hand brushing hers, "because the truth deserves a voice louder than lies." After the speeches, people approached them, executives, community leaders, even politicians. Some offered apologies for their doubts. Others extended thanks for her bravery. Maya responded with quiet grace, though her heart still raced. But not everyone was convinced. As she stepped away to catch her breath near the back of the room, she overheard two men muttering. "He's blinded." One sneered. "She's a maid. Nothing more. Mark my words, she'll use this to climb." The words stung, but before she could retreat, a young woman approached her. It was the pastor's daughter, someone Maya hadn't seen since childhood. She smiled warmly. "Don't listen to them. We know the truth. And so does Liam. That's all that matters." Maya blinked back tears and smiled faintly. "Thank you." Later that night, as the car carried them back to the estate, Richard leaned back with a weary sigh. "Well, that's done." Maya studied him in the dim light. "You didn't just protect me tonight. You changed the story. You gave Liam something to hold on to when he's old enough to read those papers." Richard turned to her, his eyes soft. And you gave me the strength to say it. I've lived too long worrying about appearances. Tonight, I remembered what truly matters. No. She felt her heart swell, a strange warmth filling her chest. What does matter, Richard? He didn't hesitate. Loyalty, truth, and family, the kind you choose, not the kind that betrays you. The words lingered in the air between them as the city lights faded behind. For the first time since the nightmare began, Maya felt the scales tip. Not in favor of whispers, not in favor of fear, but in favor of something stronger. She leaned her head lightly against the window, watching the night sky, and whispered to herself, maybe I do belong. The days following the gala were a whirlwind. Richard's public declaration that Maya was family had been splashed across every front page and broadcast on every evening news show. Some praised his courage, others mocked what they called a billionaire's fairy tale of loyalty. But no one could ignore it. The Langston name was louder than ever. Inside the estate, Maya felt both safer and more exposed. Neighbors who once smiled politely now whispered when she walked by. Staff members seemed divided, some offering warm nods of respect, others averting their eyes as though her very presence was dangerous. One afternoon, while Maya was tidying the sunroom, she overheard two maids talking in hushed voices. She's got him wrapped around her finger, one whispered. It won't last, the other replied. Men like him don't marry women like her. She'll be sent away once the headlines fade. Maya's hands trembled as she folded a blanket. She had long grown used to whispers, but now they came from inside the walls she thought she'd begun to belong to. That evening, when Liam ran to her with a new drawing, a stick figure family, with himself, Richard, and Maya all holding hands, her eyes burned. She hugged him tightly, but the ache in her chest grew sharper. Richard noticed. He found her later in the kitchen, staring at the kettle though it wasn't boiling. What is it? He asked softly. Maya shook her head, then forced herself to speak. It's just, the more you lift me up, the harder people want to tear me down, even some of the staff. His jaw tightened. If anyone in this house disrespects you, she interrupted, her voice gentle. Don't fight them, Richard. That only makes it worse. I don't need everyone's approval. But I need to know this isn't hurting Liam. No. Richard's face softened. He drew a picture of us today, didn't he? He sees you as his anchor, Maya. That's what matters. Her heart steadied slightly at his words, but she knew storms still brewed outside. The next storm came faster than expected. On Wednesday morning, a group of shareholders held a press conference downtown. They demanded Richard's resignation, claiming his personal entanglement with a household staff member had compromised the company's image. They see you as reckless, Harris explained bluntly when he visited the estate that night, and they're using Maya as their weapon. They think if they attack her, you'll crumble. Richard's face darkened. I won't let them dictate my family or my company. Maya listened from the corner, her stomach twisting. But they're not wrong, are they? I am the easiest target. Harris turned to her, his voice firm. You're not the problem, Maya. You're the truth. And truth makes liars desperate. McCrest. The breaking point came at a fundraising event that weekend. It was smaller than the gala, but the crowd was sharper, hungrier. Richard gave another speech, brief and steady, but when he stepped down, a reporter pushed forward, microphone outstretched. Mr. Langston, do you plan to marry your maid now that you've made her family? The words cut through the hall like a blade. Laughter rippled, cruel and mocking. Maya froze, her face flushing hot as every head turned. Richard's eyes blazed. He stepped in front of her, his voice sharp as steel. Maya William is not a punchline. She is the woman who saved my son's life when no one else could. If that offends your sense of class, then perhaps it is your soul that is impoverished. The hall went silent. The reporter stammered, lowering his microphone. But Maya felt her knees tremble. Richard's words had been fierce, but the damage of the laughter lingered like poison. Back in the car, the silence between them was heavy. Finally, Maya whispered, "You can't keep shielding me like that. Every time you do, they turn sharper. And her voice cracked, I don't know how much more I can take." Richard reached across, his hand covering hers. "Then let me bear it with you. Don't carry this alone." She met his gaze, her heart aching. "You don't understand. They don't just doubt me. They despise me. They see me as a maid who dared step into a place she doesn't belong. And maybe they're right. No, Richard said firmly. They're wrong. You belong here because you've earned it with every breath, every sacrifice. I won't let them take that away from you. Tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, whispering, Then help me believe it, Richard. Because right now, I don't. That night, unable to sleep, Maya wandered into the garden. The roses glowed faintly in the moonlight, the fountain whispering softly. She sank onto the cold stone edge, staring at her reflection in the water. She thought of the laughter in the hall, of the whispered doubts, of the child's drawing taped proudly to the fridge. She thought of the life she had before this, the quiet, invisible life of a maid who cleaned and served and went unnoticed. Safe. But then she thought of Liam's arms around her neck, of Richard's voice steady beside her, of the promises she had made to stand. She whispered into the night, Lord, give me strength, because I don't know if I can keep standing without you. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly on the gravel. She turned to see Richard, his coat draped over his shoulders, his face weary but tender. I knew I'd find you here, he said. He sat beside her, the silence between them deep and unbroken for a long while. Finally, he spoke. Maya, I can't promise the whispers will stop. I can't promise the world will ever see you the way Liam and I do. But I can promise you this. As long as I have breath, you will never stand alone. Her throat tightened, and she whispered back, Then maybe I can keep standing after all. For the first time that day, she felt the weight ease, just slightly. The night still held its shadows, but she was no longer afraid of them. The following week dawned with more headlines, sharper than before. One read, Langston heiress in the making, another mocked. From apron to throne. The maid, who would be queen. Each word seemed designed to twist the knife deeper into Maya's spirit. She avoided the papers now, but she could not avoid the stares. Whenever she accompanied Richard into town or took Liam for a walk near the park, eyes followed her. Some looked with admiration, but others brimmed with judgment, lips whispering behind polite smiles. One afternoon, as she walked Liam home from the park, a woman she recognized from church stopped her on the sidewalk. Maya, dear, the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You've certainly made a name for yourself, but don't you think it's dangerous to play at being more than what you are? Maya stiffened. Liam squeezed her hand, sensing the tension. She forced a smile and replied softly, I'm exactly what I am, ma'am. Nothing more, nothing less. Then she led Liam away before the woman could answer. That night, staring at herself in the mirror, Maya whispered, I can't keep hiding. If I stay silent, they'll write my story for me. The next morning, she sought out Richard in his office. He looked up from his desk, eyes weary from meetings and phone calls. What is it? I need to speak, she said simply. He frowned. To me? Number to them. The press, the town, everyone who's been twisting my name. You've defended me enough, Richard, but if I don't find my own voice, then I'll always be just the maid who hid behind yours. Richard's eyes softened with worry. They'll eat you alive out there. Maybe, she admitted, but at least it'll be my voice they're chewing on, not rumors. He leaned back, studying her. Then he nodded slowly. If you're certain, I'll stand beside you. But Maya, speak from your heart. Not for me. Not for the company. For you. 2 days later, a press conference was arranged at the community center downtown. Harris had helped coordinate security. Richard stood at her side as they entered the hall, but Maya knew the spotlight would not be his this time. The room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for position. Cameras whirred, microphones bristled like weapons. Richard gave a brief introduction, then stepped back, leaving Maya alone at the podium. She gripped the sides, her hands trembling. For a moment, the sea of faces threatened to drown her. But then she remembered Liam's drawing, the three of them holding hands. She drew strength from that image and began. My name is Maya William, she said. her voice steady despite the quiver in her chest. "You've heard my name in headlines. You've read lies about me in papers. Some of you have whispered about me in your homes. But tonight, you're going to hear from me, not about me." The room hushed. Cameras zoomed closer. I was born right here in Atlanta. My mother scrubbed floors in houses not so different from the Langston estate. My father worked long nights driving trucks. They taught me that dignity isn't given by titles or wealth, it's earned by what you do when the world is watching and when it's not. When I became a maid, I wasn't ashamed. Work is work. I never expected to be part of this family's story. But when a man came to steal a little boy from his father, I didn't think about my job. I thought about Liam. I thought about his laughter, his innocence, his life, and I fought for him with everything I had. "No." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "Some of you say I don't belong here, that I'm reaching for something above my place. But I tell you this, there is no higher place than protecting a child. There is no shame in loyalty, and there is no crime in being seen for what I am, a woman who refused to let evil win." The room was silent now, every eye fixed on her. "You can keep writing your stories," Maya continued, her voice stronger, "but Liam will grow up knowing the truth. Richard will lead his company with his head held high. And I will keep standing with them. Because that is who I am. That is what I choose. If that makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps it says more about you than about me." She stepped back from the podium, her heart racing. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, unexpectedly, applause broke out. It started with one reporter, then another, until the room echoed with clapping. Not everyone joined in, but enough did to make her knees weak with relief. Richard returned to her side, pride blazing in his eyes. He whispered, "You were magnificent." That evening, back at the estate, the mood was lighter. The staff who had once whispered now looked at her with something closer to respect. Madeline found her in the kitchen and clasped her hand. "You spoke truth, child, and truth has a way of settling even the noisiest rooms." Maya smiled, though exhaustion tugged at her. Later, as she tucked Liam into bed, he looked up at her with wide eyes. "I saw you on television, Miss Maya. You weren't scared." She kissed his forehead. "Oh, I was scared, sweetheart. But sometimes, being brave means doing it anyway." He grinned sleepily. "You're the bravest person I know." Her eyes stung, but she smiled. Then I must be doing something right. When she finally returned to her room, she sat on the edge of her bed, the quiet of the night wrapping around her. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. The whispers hadn't vanished, but they no longer controlled her. She had spoken her truth, and the world had listened. She whispered into the silence, "I've found my voice, and I'm not giving it back." Outside, the night stretched calm and wide, but inside Maya, something new had taken root. Not just survival, not just loyalty, but the power of her own voice. The morning after Maya's speech, the Langston estate awoke to a world buzzing with her words. News outlets replayed her press conference on repeat. Commentators debated her tone, her history, her right to stand where she stood. For every article praising her courage, another questioned her motives. One prominent magazine called her a modern-day Rosa Parks of loyalty, while a rival publication sneered with the headline, "From mop to microphone. Is Maya William a hero or a hustler?" The split was palpable. In town, strangers stopped her to shake her hand, thanking her for speaking truth in a world too quick to lie. Yet just as often, she caught glares, overheard mutters of opportunist and gold digger. Inside the estate, the staff seemed more careful. Some offered warm smiles, as if her bravery had lifted them too. Others kept their distance, eyes down, their whispers tucked just out of reach. Maya tried to carry on as usual, folding linens, setting Liam's breakfast, humming softly to calm her nerves, but she could feel the air shift. The fight had grown bigger than Jacob, bigger than Clarence. It was about her now, whether she belonged, whether she was allowed to stand beside the Langston name. That afternoon, Richard called a meeting in the library. Harris was there, along with Madeline, and even a few trusted board members who had come to discuss the fallout. Richard stood by the window, the sun painting hard lines across his face. "They're dividing themselves over Maya," one board member said bluntly. "Half the public thinks she's a symbol of courage. The other half sees her as a distraction, and the company's stock is wobbling because of it. Richard's jaw tightened. The company is stronger than gossip. Perhaps, the man replied. But perception becomes reality in business. Maya, sitting quietly near the corner, finally spoke. Maybe the problem isn't perception. Maybe the problem is that people don't know where to place me. I don't fit their boxes. I'm not just a maid, not just a heroine, not family by blood, not a businesswoman. I confuse them, and people hate being confused. Her honesty silenced the room. Madeline nodded slowly. She's right. People want simple stories. Good guy, bad guy. Rich, poor. They don't know what to do when someone crosses the lines. Harris leaned forward. So maybe the answer isn't trying to fit into their story. Maybe it's telling yours so loud they can't rewrite it. Richard turned to Maya. Are you willing to keep doing that? To stand, even when it hurts? Maya looked down at her hands, calloused from years of work, scarred from battles she never asked for. Then she lifted her chin. I've already started. I can't stop now. The days that followed proved Harris right. Supporters began rallying behind Maya. A local church organized a prayer vigil for her, calling her a woman of courage and truth. Students at a nearby college invited her to speak about resilience. Letters arrived at the estate from mothers, fathers, and even children, thanking her for protecting Liam and standing tall. But the backlash was equally fierce. Protesters gathered outside the gates with signs. Keep maids in their place. The ugliness in their voices cut deep. At night, anonymous calls rang the estate's phone lines, spewing threats and slurs. One evening, as Maya tucked Liam into bed, he asked innocently, "Why are people yelling outside again?" She stroked his hair gently. "Because they're scared of change, sweetheart. But change doesn't wait for their permission." He frowned. "Are they mad at me?" "No," she whispered firmly. "Never you. They're mad because they don't understand love when they see it." Richard tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she saw the toll it took on him too. One night, after yet another angry news segment aired, he slammed the remote down on the table. "They talk about you like you're some object, some prop in my story," he growled. "As if you haven't saved us 100 times over. I swear. If one more of them calls you an opportunist." Maya touched his arm gently. "Don't waste your anger on them. Anger feeds them. We need something stronger." "What's stronger than anger?" he asked bitterly. "Grace," she said quietly, "and persistence." He looked at her, his expression softening. "You never stop surprising me." A week later, Maya accepted the college's invitation. Richard tried to dissuade her, worried for her safety, but she insisted. "If I let fear decide, then the whispers win." The auditorium was packed. Students filled the rows. Journalists hovered in the back, waiting to pounce on any misstep. Maya stood at the podium, heart pounding, but steadier than before. "I didn't come here tonight to defend myself," she began. "I came to tell you what I've learned. People will try to put you in a box. They'll tell you who you are, who you're allowed to be, what lines you're not allowed to cross, and if you refuse, they'll call you dangerous." Her voice grew stronger as she looked over the sea of young faces. "But I want you to know something. You are not dangerous because you refuse to fit their box. You are powerful. Powerful enough to rewrite the story. Powerful enough to change the ending." The students erupted in applause. Some stood, clapping and cheering. The sound filled the hall, echoing like thunder. For the first time, Maya didn't just feel defended, she felt celebrated. Back at the estate that night, Richard waited for her return. When she walked through the door, exhausted but glowing, he rose from his chair. "How was it?" She smiled faintly, loud, but good loud. He chuckled, relief flooding his face. "You've become more than a symbol, Maya. You've become a voice, and voices carry." She sank into a chair, her body weary but her spirit stronger than ever. "Then let them carry, because I'm not hiding anymore." Richard's gaze lingered on her, full of something deeper than gratitude. Something he hadn't yet dared to name. "Whatever storm comes next," he said softly, "we'll face it together." And as Maya looked at him, at the home that had once felt like borrowed ground but now felt like her own. She whispered back. Together. The day after her speech at the college, Maya awoke to find the estate surrounded again, but this time, it wasn't reporters with cameras. It was protesters, angry and loud, their signs stabbing the air like weapons. Keep her out. No Maid Queens. Langston betrayal. Their chants carried over the stone walls, seeping into every corner of the house. Maya stood at an upstairs window, her hands gripping the sill. Richard appeared beside her, his jaw set tight. They'll tire themselves out, he muttered. But Maya shook her head. No, they won't. Not this time. This isn't about them being tired, it's about them being threatened. Richard turned to her. You're not going out there. She looked at him, calm but firm. And if I don't? If I keep hiding? Then they win. Richard. Every ugly word, every twisted story, they win. He swore under his breath, but before he could answer, Liam's small voice called from behind them. Why are people shouting again? Maya turned, kneeling to meet his eyes. Because sometimes people shout when they're afraid, sweetheart. But shouting doesn't make them right. Oh, Richard placed a protective hand on Liam's shoulder. Stay with Madeline, he told him. We'll handle this. By late morning, the chants grew uglier. Eggs splattered against the gate. Someone lit a flare, tossing it onto the road so red smoke curled toward the estate like fire. Harris and a line of officers stood at the gates, keeping the crowd back, but the tension was sharp, dangerous. Inside, the staff gathered nervously. Some muttered that Maya should stay hidden. Others whispered that she should leave altogether until things cooled down. Maya heard them all. At last, she stood in the foyer, her scarf draped neatly around her bruised throat, her chin high. Open the gate, she told Harris. He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maya, if you step out there, they'll see me, she interrupted. Not a rumor, not a headline. Me. Richard's hand clamped around her arm. You don't owe them anything. Men. Her eyes softened. Maybe not. But I owe Liam the truth. If he grows up thinking hiding is the answer, then what have I taught him? Richard's face worked with conflict. Finally, he exhaled. Then I'm going with you. She shook her head gently. Not this time. If you're beside me, they'll say it's just you protecting me again. I need to stand alone. Pain flickered in his eyes, but he released her arm. Then don't stand too long. Harris, keep her safe. Oh. When the gates opened, the roar of the crowd swelled like a wave. Maya stepped forward, her steps slow but steady, until she stood just beyond the iron bars. Harris flanked her discreetly, officers forming a line behind, but she raised her hands to show she carried nothing. The chants faltered slightly at the sight of her. She wasn't the untouchable figure in headlines or rumors. She was flesh and blood, standing before them. I hear you, she called, her voice carrying over the noise. I hear your anger. I hear your fear. But let me tell you the truth you keep twisting. I did not come here to climb. I did not come here to take. I came here to protect a child, and I would do it again 1,000 times no matter how loud you shout. The crowd stirred, some quieting, others jeering louder. A man at the front sneered. You don't belong here. You're nothing but a maid. Maya's voice sharpened. Yes, I was a maid, and I'm not ashamed of that. Work is never shameful, but when men came to steal a little boy, I became more than that. I became the wall between him and danger. And if that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then your eyes are blind. A woman shouted from the back. You think you're one of them now? You'll never be a Langston. Maya's chest tightened, but she pressed on. I don't need to be a Langston by blood. Family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty. And loyalty is what saved Liam, not money. Not titles. If you can't see that, then perhaps you should ask yourselves what you'd do if it were your child in that van. The question hung heavy in the air. Silence rippled briefly through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their signs. But then, from the far side, a bottle sailed through the air. It shattered at Maya's feet. Glass spraying. Harris moved instantly, pulling her back. Officers surged forward, pushing the line of protesters away. The crowd roared again, angrier now, surging against the barricades. Richard rushed out from the gates, fury in his eyes. He pulled Maya back into the safety of the driveway, his voice shaking. That's enough. No more speeches. Not when they're throwing glass. But Maya's voice was steady. Even as her hands shook. They heard me, Richard. Even if they don't admit it now, they heard me. That night, the estate was sealed tight. Harris doubled the guards, and Richard hovered near Maya like a storm cloud ready to break. You could have been killed, he said hoarsely as they sat in the library. She met his gaze, weary but unflinching. Or I could have stayed silent and been buried alive in lies. At least this way, I fought. His face softened, grief and admiration mingling. You're braver than all of us. No, she whispered. I'm just too tired of being small. Later, as she tucked Liam into bed, he clutched her hand tightly. I saw you on television again, he murmured sleepily. You weren't scared. Her throat tightened. Oh, I was scared, baby. But sometimes bravery is just being louder than your fear. He smiled faintly before drifting off. Maya sat by his bed a long while, listening to his breathing, reminding herself why she fought. Downstairs, Richard poured himself a drink he didn't touch. He looked toward the stairs where Maya had gone, whispering to the empty room. How do I keep her safe when she keeps saving me? The fire crackled in response, the only witness to his question. The night after the protest turned violent, the Langston estate lay in an uneasy quiet. Guards patrolled the grounds with flashlights, their beams slicing through the shadows. Inside, the family moved softly, as if even footsteps might stir trouble again. Maya lay awake in her small room, replaying the moment the glass shattered at her feet. She had not flinched in front of the crowd, but alone in the dark, her body shook with the weight of it. By morning, the headlines had shifted. Maya William faces violence with grace. A maid's courage shames the mob. Clips of her speech circulated online, and thousands praised her bravery. Messages of support flooded the estate, letters, emails, even flowers left at the gate. For the first time, the tide of public opinion seemed to tilt in her favor. Yet beneath the praise, another shadow gathered. At breakfast, Richard scrolled through messages on his phone, while Liam devoured pancakes. He looked up at Maya, his brow furrowed. The company's PR team says sympathy is pouring in. Investors are breathing easier. But there's something else. He slid the phone across the table. Maya glanced at the screen. An anonymous message glowed coldly. You survived, Jacob. You survived, Clarence. But you won't survive us. Her chest tightened. Us? Richard nodded grimly. That's the problem. Whoever sent this, it isn't Jacob's leftovers. It's someone new. Liam looked between them innocently. Is something wrong? Maya forced a smile, smoothing his hair. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Eat your pancakes. But her hands trembled as she set the phone down. Later that day, Harris arrived, his face drawn. He carried a folder under his arm. We traced the threat, he said, spreading photographs on the table. There's a group stirring trouble in the city. Anti-immigrant, anti-poor, anti-anyone who doesn't fit. They've latched onto your story, Maya. To them, you represent everything they hate. A woman who dared to rise, who dared to belong. Maya's throat went dry. So it isn't just about me. It's about what I stand for. Exactly, Harris said, and that makes it dangerous. They're organized, and they're angry. They're not just shouting in the streets. They've been linked to arson, to attacks. Richard slammed his fist on the table. I won't let them anywhere near my son or Maya. Harris nodded. We'll tighten security. But you need to understand this isn't the same as Jacob's betrayal. This isn't family greed. This is ideology. These people fight because they believe hate makes them strong. Maya steadied herself against the chair. Then we fight with something stronger. Oh. That evening, she found herself walking the halls, unable to rest. She stopped outside Liam's door, listening to his soft breathing. She whispered, I won't let them touch you. Not ever. When she turned, Richard was behind her, his face lined with exhaustion. You shouldn't carry this alone, he murmured. She met his eyes. I've been carrying battles my whole life, Richard, but this one feels bigger than me. He stepped closer. Then let it be ours. Don't shut me out. Mel. Her heart swelled, torn between fear and gratitude. She nodded once. Hours. The first strike came 2 nights later. A guard spotted movement near the north fence. By the time he reached it, flames licked up the side of the old storage shed. The fire spread fast, smoke curling into the night sky. Alarms rang, and staff rushed to douse the blaze. Liam woke crying, clinging to Maya as she carried him outside to safety. Through the chaos, a single message was painted across the wall in black spray paint: "You don't belong." Richard's face hardened as he stared at the words. They want to scare us. They won't win. Maya held Liam tight, her throat burning from smoke and fury. This isn't about me anymore. It's about every person they think doesn't belong. The next morning, Harris stood with Richard and Maya in the charred remains of the shed. He pointed to boot prints in the ash. They're sending a message, and they won't stop here. Richard clenched his fists. Then we take the fight to them. Maya touched his arm. Not with fists, Richard. If we stoop to their hate, we lose. We fight with truth, with community. They want me isolated. Instead, I'll stand louder. Harris gave her a long look. That's brave, Maya, but it paints a target on your back. She drew a deep breath. Then let them aim. I won't hide. That evening, Richard gathered the staff in the great hall. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air. He stood tall, his voice strong. This family has been through betrayal, kidnapping, violence. Now we face something different: hate from strangers who don't even know us. But hear me now. Maya is part of this family. If they come for her, they come for all of us. And we will not be broken. The staff nodded, some with tears in their eyes. Maya felt her chest tighten, overwhelmed by the sight of unity. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Later, when the hall was empty, Richard and Maya lingered by the fire. He studied her, his voice low. You've turned my home into something I never thought it could be: a place of courage, not just wealth. But I'm afraid, Maya, afraid of what they'll do next. She looked into the flames, then back at him. Fear is natural. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through it anyway. And we'll walk through it together. His hand brushed hers, hesitant but steady. Together. For a moment, the world outside the flames, the threats, the hate seemed far away. In its place was something stronger, a quiet resolve that bound them. Maya whispered, almost to herself. They can paint their walls with hate, but they'll never erase the truth. I belong here, and I'm not leaving. Richard's eyes glistened in the firelight. And I'll never let you. The charred shed had barely cooled when the next blow arrived. 2 nights later, long after the estate had gone quiet, the power cut out. Lights flickered once, then the whole house plunged into darkness. Silence followed, too deep, too deliberate. Maya shot upright in her bed, her heart pounding. She knew this wasn't an accident. She grabbed a flashlight from her nightstand and bolted into the hall, nearly colliding with Richard. He held a lantern, his face grim. Stay close, he ordered. From down the corridor came Liam's frightened cries. Maya rushed to him, scooping him into her arms. His small hands clutched her scarf as she whispered, "Shh, I've got you, you're safe." But even as she said it, glass shattered downstairs. Voices followed, low, harsh. Male. They had breached the estate. Richard's face hardened. Harris said they might escalate. He was right. He pulled a pistol from a drawer in the console table and handed Maya a second flashlight. Stay behind me. Maya shook her head. I won't hide, Richard. Not this time. Before he could argue, more crashes rang out. The intruders were inside. Harris and 2 officers had been stationed on the grounds that night. Gunfire cracked in the distance as they engaged the attackers near the gate. But 3 men slipped through the rear patio, clad in dark clothing, faces masked. They moved with purpose, one carrying a canister of fuel, another gripping a crowbar. Maya pressed Liam into Madeline's arms. Take him upstairs. Lock the door. Don't open it until you hear my voice. Madeline's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded, clutching the boy. Richard grabbed Maya's arm. You're not going down there alone. Then we go together, she said firmly. They moved through the darkened halls, flashlight sweeping across polished floors now littered with broken glass. From the dining room came the sound of furniture overturned. The smell of gasoline stung the air. "Cowards," Richard shouted into the dark. "You dare come into my home?" A mocking voice answered. "This house doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the people who know their place." And she, a flashlight beam caught Maya's face, "doesn't." The man with the crowbar lunged. Richard fired a warning shot, the boom echoing like thunder. The intruder staggered but kept coming. Maya swung a heavy candlestick from the sideboard, striking his arm. The crowbar clattered to the floor. Another man hurled the fuel canister, dousing the curtains. A third lit a match. "No," Maya shouted, hurling herself forward. She slapped the flame from his hand, the sulfur burning her skin. Pain seared through her palm, but she refused to let go. Not this house, not this family. The fight was chaos. Richard grappled with the first intruder, fists and fury colliding. Maya wrestled with the man trying to relight his matches, slamming him into the dining table. Wood cracked beneath them. Through it all, she felt no fear, only fire. Fire for Liam, for Richard, for every whisper that had told her she didn't belong. She struck, blocked, shoved, clawed, until the man finally buckled. Harris burst through the rear door then, gun drawn. "Police, down!" His men swarmed in behind him, tackling the remaining intruders. Within minutes, zip ties bound their wrists, their shouts silenced beneath booted guards. But the damage lingered. Curtains smoldered, smoke curling upward. The estate trembled with the echo of violence. Richard turned to Maya, his shirt torn, his face streaked with sweat. "Are you hurt?" She held up her burned palm, raw and blistering. "Nothing I can't handle." He cupped her face with trembling hands, his voice rough. "You could have been killed." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "So could you. So could Liam. That's why we fight." "No." Once the intruders were dragged away, the fire extinguished, and the estate secured, Harris stayed behind to debrief. "These weren't random thugs," he said grimly. "They're part of that extremist group I told you about. Tonight was a message. They wanted you terrified." Richard's voice was steel. They failed, but Maya knew better. She sat in the library later, her palm bandaged, her body aching. The terror lingered. Yet, so did something stronger. Resolve. When Richard entered, he found her staring into the fire. He sat beside her, silent at first. Then he whispered, "I thought I'd lost everything when Jacob betrayed me. But tonight, watching you fight, I realized something. I haven't lost. I've gained. I've gained you." Maya's breath caught. She turned to him, the flicker of firelight softening his tired face. "Richard." He shook his head, eyes fierce. "No more hiding, Maya. No more letting them tell us who we are. You are family, and I'll stand beside you, whatever it costs." Tears slid down her cheeks, not of weakness but of release. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Then let's make them hear it. Let's make them see that loyalty is stronger than hate." He held her gaze, his voice low and sure. Together. Upstairs, Liam slept soundly in Madeline's arms, unaware of the night's violence. Downstairs, Harris and his men stood guard, ensuring the estate was secure. But in the quiet of the library, Richard and Maya sat hand in hand, staring into the flames. They knew the fight was far from over. The extremists would come again. The whispers would grow louder. The threats would sharpen. Yet for the first time, Maya didn't feel small. She didn't feel like an intruder in someone else's story. She felt like exactly what she had become, the protector of a child, the partner of a man, the voice of a truth too strong to be silenced. The night had brought hate into their home, but it had also revealed something greater, the unbreakable bond of loyalty forged in fire. The morning after the attack, the Langston estate still smelled faintly of smoke. Shards of glass littered the patio. Boot prints scarred the marble floors, but the house still stood, and so did the people inside. Maya woke with her hand throbbing beneath its bandage, but her spirit steadier than ever. Downstairs, Richard was already on the phone. His voice carried through the hall.